Welcome to episode 22 of Cooking for Moderately Lazy People. Today, we're going to be making 3C cookies. What are 3C cookies, you ask? Coconut, caramel, and chocolate. This is a recipe I tried because I wanted to emulate a Girl Scout cookie Samoa or Caramel Delight, depending on what region you live in, apparently. How close did I get to emulating that cookie? Nowhere near it. These are not even close to what they were intended to be originally. But I really like them, so I saved the recipe anyway. I didn't fail, I succeeded in a completely opposite direction. That being said, let's get started. Let's kick things off with 2 sticks of butter. We'll melt them and add 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar and 3/4 of a cup of granulated sugar. We'll cream these with a hand mixer and then beat in 2 eggs, 1/2 tablespoon of vanilla extract, and an optional 2 tablespoons of coconut rum, and mix until well combined. Now for the dry ingredients. In a separate bowl, we're going to put together 2.5 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. We'll whisk these until combined. Then we'll combine our wet and dry ingredients. Once everything is mixed enough to look like batter, we'll fold in 2 cups of coconut flakes. At this point, we'll go ahead and preheat the oven to 350 degrees. Using a cookie scoop or a tablespoon, we're going to drop about rounded tablespoons full onto a baking sheet. I'm going to spread these out quite a bit because this dough will expand significantly while baking and result in large, flat cookies. This may be due to the proportions of the dry ingredients or the inclusion of the optional rum, but the cookies are delicious despite having the general shape of thin coasters. And while I'm dropping the dough onto the baking sheets, let's talk about the cost. As per usual, costs may vary in your area. The coconut flakes are a little over $4 per bag, but we're only using about 2/3 of the bag, so I'm going to call that 2.5. The butter comes in at $4.50 for a 4-pack, but we're only using half of that, so we'll call that 2.25. We're using about 1/3 of a $3 bag of flour, so that's $1. Eggs are also around $3, but we're only using 2, so that's only 50 cents. We're probably using less than $1 worth of sugar total, and combined with the extract, I'm going to call that about $1.50. The coconut rum is optional, but it won't be more than about $1 worth. We're going to use half to 2/3 of a bag of chocolate chips to make the chocolate topping, and at $5.50 for a bag, for simplicity's sake, let's just call that $4. Now, the salted caramel can vary wildly depending on what type you use, anywhere from $3 to $6. We likely wouldn't use a whole container no matter what kind we use, so I'm going to cap that at $3. I'm going to be using a homemade salted caramel, which may appear as a short in the Cooking for Moderately Lazy People series somewhere down the line. Adding everything up, and using the worst case scenario of using both the optional coconut rum and store-bought caramel, that still brings the total to under $16 for a batch. Considering this recipe tends to make around 30 cookies, that puts it at around 50 cents per cookie. When we finish placing our cookies on the baking sheet, they go into the oven for 9 to 12 minutes. Once our treats finish baking, we'll pull them from the oven and move them to our wire rack to cool. Once they've cooled to room temperature, we'll get our toppings ready. First, let's toss the chocolate chips I mentioned earlier into a double boiler and melt them. Once melted, we'll grab a spoon and start spreading the chocolate onto the cookies. Once that's done, we'll drizzle the caramel on top of the cookies. Depending on what caramel you use, you might want to warm it up slightly. I found that microwaving my homemade caramel for 15 to 20 seconds tends to get it into a drizzleable state. Once we have both toppings onto our treats, we will allow them both to cool. And here are the 3C cookies. They're basically like little edible plates for chocolate and caramel. If you like this video, or the recipe, please feel free to like, share, comment on the video, or subscribe to the channel. My next Cooking for Moderately Lazy People video after this one will be the final results of my homemade candy bucket experiment, where in the spirit of Halloween I made 5 different kinds of hard candy and had several people rate them. The results were mixed, and one of the first batches of candy that I made did go straight into the trash. So if you want to see me succeed or fail at confectionery, or both, stay tuned for the video and the shorts over the next few weeks. As always, thanks for watching, and bon appetit.